welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I am delighted to be joined by Charles Bush, author of our very own The Boy with the Jade. Welcome, Charles.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing quite well. I want to just dive right into this and ask you, what is this based off of? It's based on a Chinese story, The Dream of the Red Chamber. I know it comes by many different titles. So talk about what The Boy with the Jade, the original story that it's based on.
Well, I wouldn't really call it a story. It's a novel that, in translation, runs anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 words. So it's this massive tome that's said to have 800 different characters and 40 major characters, 120 chapters, goes on and on. It's actually rather confusing to read because there's so many characters, so many plot lines. Uh, but it's a Chinese classic. It's almost every person in China's been exposed to it in one way or another. Generally, in school, they wouldn't read the whole thing, but they'd read some selections of it. And there's been a couple of TV miniseries that have done a lot to popularize it. But anyway, it's often said to be the finest work of Chinese literature in all of Chinese history. So that's the basis for my novel. In Chinese, it's called Hong Lo Meng, and it's been translated into English under several different titles. Uh, Dream of the Red Chamber, Story of the Stone, Dream of Red Mansions. The title is sort of a complicated issue in and of itself.
So I have some friends who are from China, and when I told them about this story, they were just so excited. Can you compare it to something in American literature that someone like myself can relate such a classic story to?
Wow, I guess Moby Dick in the sense that it's it's long and complicated and somewhat hard to read, maybe.
Well, tell me about that part of it. So first you had to get through it, this long, complicated story, and then you, of course, identified a story or, something within this narrative that you wanted to highlight. So can you talk about getting through it yourself and what inspired you then to recreate a part of this classic story?
Well, yeah, I read it actually a couple of times in two different translations to start off with. And then I read some literary criticism, which actually, in a way, was helped organize it in my mind because, you're left after reading the whole 2,500 pages. um, you're left with this sort of mass of characters and events and themes and things. But particularly, there's a work, the classic Chinese novel by a writer named Xie, that really sort of gave it the focus to me. And I focus, there's the major character in the novel is Baoyu, the heir to the Jia family. But to say he's the major character doesn't mean like he appears in practically every chapter. I mean, long sections go by where he completely disappears. And also there's sort of gaps in the plot and but I knew I wanted to focus on Baoyu. I guess I sort of in a way identified with Baoyu. He's a boy, I'm a male, and that sort of thing. And but I had to sort of focus. If I was going to focus on Baoyu, I had to sort of extract the Baoyu portions from this massive uh, multi-plot, multi-character book. So what I did, I actually did a chapter by chapter summary of the novel, 120 chapters. So I wrote 120 little plot summaries. And then I went through and shaded, and how you do on the computer, shaded all the areas that Baoyu appeared in. So then when I looked at this, I could at least follow the Baoyu plot line through the whole thing, leaving out the non-Baoyu plot lines.
And then where did you fill in Baoyu's story? Because as you said, there are a lot of gaps in in what happens with Baoyu. How did you fill it in and create a cohesive narrative for The Boy with the Jade?
Well, the biggest gap is, I should back up for people who aren't familiar, that one of the major themes, if not the major theme of the novel, is the issue of Baoyu taking the imperial examination. The imperial examination is this Chinese institution. It's been around for 1,000 years. At the time he's doing it, it originated around about 800 AD. And every young Chinese, high-born Chinese boy was supposed to take the imperial examination. And then once you took the imperial examination, you were entitled to become a government official. Well, Baoyu's family just is adamant that he take the examination. There's just no question about it. He has to take it. Baoyu himself doesn't want to take it. He has no interest. The examination is based on Confucian, the Confucian classics, 9 books that are the corpus of Confucianism. He finds these books boring and sort of meaningless. He is not interested in becoming a government official. He doesn't want to take the imperial examination. But finally, without giving away too much of the plot, he breaks down, he gives in, and he takes the imperial examination. The problem I faced was that in the Chinese original, the Hong Lo Meng, there's a scene where he says goodbye to his family and heads off to the building examination. But he doesn't appear after that. We don't see, other than one scene, which I won't talk about what it is, but which is not at the Imperial examination. But there's nothing about Bao Yu taking the examination in the Hong Lo Meng. So if I was going to make, since the Imperial examination is such a focus of the story, I knew I had to have him, go there, arrive at the compound, take the examination, and really go into a lot of detail on that. So that all had to be filled in, not from the Hong Lo Meng, but from other sources. And it was fairly easy to get information about the physical setting and the procedures of the imperial examination. There's several good books on that. Essentially all these young men, and there are thousands of them. The examination takes place every 3 years. There are thousands of them, and they all go to this examination compound, which is essentially sort of concentration camp where they're all put in tiny individual cells. They're very dirty and cramped, and they have to stay there for 3 days. It's locked. They can't exit even if they die. They have to remain in their cells. And it's a fascinating story just from the physical setting and the procedures they used. But there was, even after reading several books and doing a lot of research on the Imperial examination, there was still sort of a gap that I was facing that everybody talked about. Well, the examination tests the Confucian classics. It's based on these books, and it has to be written in what's called the eight-legged essay, which was a literary form, the very rigid literary form. But despite all the reading I was doing, I never was able to find an examination question or an answer, no specific question. And of course, in a novel, you don't just generalize, well, this is based on the Confucian classics and it's done in the eight-leg form. I mean, the essence of a novel is they're very specific. You're talking, you're doing you're not just as a rule, you're doing one specific instance. So I needed a question, at least one question and answer. So finally, in one of the books that I had on the examination, I noticed a footnote saying that there was a good example of a question and answer in this scholarly article, which was in an obscure scholarly journal in the 1970s. Fortunately, I live in San Francisco, and across the bay is the University of California, Berkeley, which, among its other many fine attributes, has an outstanding East Asian library. So I went over to Berkeley, and they indeed had this 1975 issue of of this obscure scholarly journal. So I went over there and copied it. And at that point, I had my question, had my answer, and that was the sort of last gap that I had to fill in the novel. But that was a memorable day in terms of the writing of the novel.
Well, having read the book several times myself, that's one of the most enjoyable parts of it for me is reading the questions and answers. And of course, you have more than one, so you must have had to come up with those on your own. But the just the putting yourself in that situation of taking that exam, I can think being in grad school and having to sit in a room and do a 4 hour essay test, which wouldn't have been nearly as grueling as what Val went through. But just kudos to you on it was felt so authentic. It felt so interesting. I really wanted to know how is he going to answer this. So that was really cool.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Can you give us a little bit of the kind of historical setting? What time period is it? What dynasty is in power? Where exactly does Baoyu live?
Well, there again, you get into which is so often true with the Hong you get into controversy that it's not real clear. The novel states that it takes place during the Ming Dynasty, which was 1368 to 1644. Uh, on the other hand, all the descriptions and all of the settings and everything are clearly taking place during the Qing Dynasty, which 1644 to 1911. And the novel was written during the Qing Dynasty, and the author of the novel grew up somewhat similar to Baoyu in a wealthy aristocratic household, actually one that became less wealthy as he grew older in the Qing Dynasty. Now, the reason is that there was tremendous censorship and, well, sort of danger in writing about politics during the Qing Dynasty. It was an authoritarian regime, um, well, like many we've been experiencing lately. And so it's dangerous to write about the Qing dynasty. So he said, no, it's taking place during the Ming dynasty. But actually, it really is taking place during the Qing dynasty. Uh, and because all the descriptions, the Manchus and everything, that's all Qing. So again, it's sort of confused. One interesting thing is that there are two television series, uh, two TV miniseries based on the novel. In one of them, they have Baoyu as this sort of luxuriant haircut, sort of like a 1970s rock star haircut, which would, of course, been the Ming Dynasty. And then the other one, he has a queue that, his head is shaved and he has one little tail coming out the back, which would have been the Qing Dynasty, because in the Qing Dynasty, everyone, all males were supposed to wear queues. So, when does the novel occur? Like so much about the Hong Meng, it's contradictory and difficult. You can't just explain it in one sentence.
Can you go into your own background a little bit about what inspired you to write about this history, what interests you in it, and maybe even a little bit about your background writing legal thrillers and what led you to historical fiction?
Well, when I was young, I always thought it'd be fun to write historical fiction. And I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and I majored in history in college, and I actually went to graduate school in history. We share that in common. But job prospects were zero to less than zero. So I realized that I had to be practical. So I went to law school and became a lawyer. And my dream of writing historical fiction, I guess, well, it just sort of went to sleep. And years went by, and I had an interesting career as a lawyer, and had a couple of I did several kinds of law during my career. One of them was I worked on a couple of death penalty cases, and the other was other interesting part of my legal career was that I represented a group of houseboat residents who were fighting to remain as sort of a anarchic community. And so I thought, well, this is the sort of fodder that really makes good novels. My first novel was about a death penalty case, what went wrong with Oscar Toll. And then my second novel, called Houseboat Wars, was the story of this rowdy 1970s late hippie movement type of rebellion in Richardson Bay in San Francisco. So I sort of, at that point, I sort of used up my legal career, the most interesting parts of my legal career. So I thought, well, maybe I should go back to writing historical fiction. Meanwhile, I'm switching back in time now. I'd gotten interested in Hong Lo Meng because for decades now, I've been partnered with a Chinese American man. And he, in the 1990s, decided that as a sort of roots project type of thing, he would read the six classic Chinese novels, which are most of them are quite long and old, but he was going to do it. So I thought, well, no, this is not me. But he started reading them and he kept talking about them. I kept hearing about them and how much he was enjoying them and how fascinating they were. And so I thought, well, maybe rather than try to fight it, I should join it. So I started reading the six classic Chinese novels myself. And I would say I found something interesting in each of the six. I mean, no, I wasn't enamored with each and every one of them. But it was an interesting experience, except for the Hong Lo Meng, Dream of the Red Chamber, which that just grabbed me for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe there may be some personal aspects to it. My father was in politics. I was probably expected to follow along that. And so, but anyway, for whatever the reason, I just became fascinated with the Hong Lo Meng and particularly with the character of Baoyu. These two streams started to converge. I'd already started writing fiction. I liked writing fiction, and I'd had, small success with my first two novels. And meanwhile, I'd become fascinated with Hong Lo Meng. So these two streams merged. So I decided my third novel would be something inspired by the Hong Lo Meng, the choice of that was that while it's a wonderful work to read, most people, certainly most Americans, even most Chinese, are not really going to read it. They may read sections, they may watch the DVD. But I mean, at 2,500 words with this 800 characters and things, it's just not something that's very accessible to you. It's just not, as a practical matter, something that people are going to read. So I thought, well, I can produce something that people might enjoy reading. And that would provide a service and also be fun for me to sort of, in a way, it was sort of to try to organize it in my own mind. How would this novel look if it were written in a way that would appeal to a 21st century reader?
Can you talk a little more about your connection with Baoyu? I'm curious. One of my favorite parts of the novel is the transformation that he goes through. Did you learn anything from his experience that relates to your own experience?
I would say Baoyu learned from my experience in a way, rather, because there was a period in my life where I was very interested in Buddhism. Um, I wouldn't say I'm not interested now, but let's say being a lawyer is a very stressful, high intensity thing, and I was sort of a type A personality, I guess I would say, and intense and tended to flare up at times and get highly emotionally involved, and which is I think true of many, many lawyers. I mean, they have a high rate of mental illness and suicide. It's just it's a profession that really sort of doesn't lend itself to to tranquility. Uh, so I started reading Buddhism at that period, and it did change me, I would say. I became much more calm and even-tempered and happy, really, satisfied with my life. I think I became a better person. So I sort of, and so I understood, Bao Yu wasn't Baoyu came at it from a different angle, I think, somewhat different angle, but I could sympathize with his looking to Buddhism and Taoism based on my own experience.
Well, can you talk about the metaphor of the title itself? What does the jade represent?
Well, in the original novel, there's a whole sort of surrounding plot, which I don't include, in which it starts off in heaven, and there's a stone that uh, is torn from a rock in heaven, and there's also a flower, and the flower the stone waters the flower with the tears, and it's a very complicated sort of very metaphysical plot. And then the stone turns into the jade, and the jade comes to earth through the Buddhist monk and Taoist priest that appear in my novel, and they end up on Baoyu's neck. So that I don't include in the novel. Uh, the only reference I make to it is that when the flower is Dayu in this whole scheme of the heavenly start to the novel. And so Bao Yu and Dai Yu have met earlier, before they meet in the actual realistic part of the novel. I allude to this at the end of the first chapter that they both, when they meet each other, feel that they've met each other before, and which they have in a prior life. Uh, but I don't really elaborate it further than that. This sort of um, plot, enclosing plot that's in the original novel. But the jade, certainly the fact that it comes and goes with the Taoist priest and Buddhist monk, it disappears when he's at his worst. Then they bring it back, and then he has it throughout his life. It's the only possession that he has from the moment he's born until the last few words in the novel. Uh, so, it's a complicated, I guess, like any good symbol, it doesn't mean just one thing. It means, a variety of things.
What would you say are the key takeaways of this novel, both for a Western reader like myself who's unfamiliar with How Long Meng and doesn't know much about Chinese history and culture, and for readers who do have that tradition, do know that background, and are familiar with the original story?
Well, I mean, overall, the overall philosophical map or uh, theme of the novel is that you have two long-standing cultural traditions. On the one hand, you have Confucianism, which is, loyalty, filial piety, respecting the elders, taking the imperial examination, serving the emperor, all this whole sort of cluster of values. And this is starts in like 1,000 BC with Confucius. Well, Confucius was about 700 BC, but by the time Bao is alive, this is a tradition that's been essential to Chinese culture for 2,000 years. But at the same time, in China, you have the Buddhist Taoist tradition, which is pretty much the exact opposite. It's sort of it isn't it's purely individualistic. Each individual saves himself. You don't the family doesn't really matter. The imperial examination doesn't matter. Serving the emperor doesn't matter. It's your individual salvation, your spiritual side. And this has also been a major part of Chinese history ever since Buddhism arrived in about 300 AD. And so you have these two traditions which are very much opposed, but also have never gone away. And They both have coexisted through most of Chinese history. And Baoyu is caught between these two traditions. His family is very Confucian, zero sympathy for Buddhism, totally devoted to his taking the examination, becoming a government official, fulfilling all the Confucian duties. And on the other hand, Baoyu's sort of innate personality, or his self, what he is, which is Buddhist Taoist spiritual escape from the world. And so you embody it's you see these two traditions clash in the story of one person. I would say that's the if you want to read this novel in terms of understanding Chinese culture, that's the number one theme there.
Well, Charles, I just want to congratulate you because I really experienced this novel, and when you get to the end, just feels there's just a tremendous sense of like peace and that transformation. So, congratulations! I know you put a lot of work into this well before we ever came on to work with you with it, but we're really proud to have you as a part of our team, and I'm so glad to be able to talk to you and learn more about everything that went into this novel.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words. And I must say, it's been a wonderful experience working with history through fiction. Uh, I'm so happy that you're my publisher and that things have gone as well as they have thus far.
Well, great. Thanks again, Charles, and congratulations.
Okay. All right. Bye bye.